Now let's take a look at a few useful vector functions. Given that vectors are the basic unit in R, there are oodles of useful vector functions. So we're just going to look at a few of the more common ones that you will be able to use frequently in your scripts. The first one is the repeat function. This is a little bit similar to the sequencing function. Notice, in fact, I'm even using a sequence operator here in this repeat. So here I have a vector from 1 to 3, and I am going to repeat it 4 times. So just as you might suspect, if I look at my nums, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Let's do that again, but instead of times equals 4, we're going to use each equals 2. Now what it does is that it still repeats from 1 to 3, but it repeats each one 2 times. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. And you can even combine these. Now each of the values are repeated twice, and the entire sequence is repeated 4 times. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3 is the first sequence, and then it's again 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and so on. The next one we'll look at is the sort vector. Let's take my vector, which we can see, here it is. That environment's getting a bit cluttered, so let me go ahead and put it up here in the window. So my vector, 13, 52, 44, if we want to sort it, we can just use the sort command, and that does exactly what you would expect it to do. It sorts it in numerical orders. Notice that we can use this with characters as well. It sorts it in alphabetical order. We can do a reverse vector. Here's a reverse of my sorted vector. So now it's in reverse sort order, starting with the highest, going to the lowest. You might already anticipate how these can be useful. If you want to sort data, sometimes you want it low to high, other times high to low. Here's the range function. The range provides the minimum and the maximum. It doesn't take maximum minus minimum. Those of you who have had me for statistics know that when I talk about the range, I never like to just take maximum minus minimum. Rather, I like to express both the minimum and the maximum. And that's what R does as well with the range function. The unique function. The unique function will return each value of the vector that appears, but it will return it only once. So whereas our vector here had 2 7s, 2 8s, it returned only one of those. So if you want to see each of the unique values that appear in your vector, naturally enough, that's what unique does. The sign function will return one of 3 values, -1 for any negative number, 0 for any 0, and +1 for any positive number. Next is the order function. Let's look again at my vector and see what this is doing. This is providing for us the location of elements in numerical order. So 13 is the smallest number here, so the first in order is in location 1. But the second one is in location 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is 29 is next. In location 3 is the third one, 44. Location 6 is the fourth one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 48, and so forth. So this is providing you what element you would need to obtain in order to put these in order. So watch this. So my vector 1 is going to be the lowest one. My vector 2 is going to be next, and so forth. If I wanted to, let me just do this for the first 3. I could create another vector in which I use these order elements. And it would give me that there's the first 3 numbers in order. In a few moments, I'll show you one of the uses of this. This is a much more useful function than you might imagine. But as soon as you start to put it to use, you'll see that it can be very valuable. Let me create a logical vector. So now I have a vector here of my logicals. And this is to show you 2 functions that are useful with logicals. One is any. So if I use any, my logicals, that tells us that there is a true statement somewhere in my logicals. If I use all, the question becomes, are all of the statements in your logical true? And that is false. Now this is another one that it may not be apparent. What's the usefulness of those? Well, think about the fact that you can create logical expressions in a roundabout way, and that's usually how we use this. So consider for a moment again my vector. Now in this case, this only has 7 values, but imagine if it was 7,000 instead of 7 values. And suppose I wanted to know if any of these values are greater than 50. Then I could put any, my vector, greater than 50. And I get a true. Why? How did that happen? Well, remember what my vector greater than 50 is going to give you. It's going to give you a logical vector. So what I'm saying about these any and all functions for logical vectors is typically we're doing it indirectly. We have this intermediate step of creating a logical vector. Suppose I wanted to know in a long vector that I couldn't look at all the different values of. I wanted to know if they were all even numbers. Well, let's see. Let's take my vector again. Here it is. Obviously, we can see that they're not all even numbers by looking at it. But again, imagine if you had a huge vector and you wanted to know if they were all even numbers. Now, this might not be something you would want to do, but I'm illustrating the various potential powerful uses of this. So now I'm going to use all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my vector, and I'm going to take mod 2 of my vector. Remember what modulus does? It gives you a remainder. If this is an even number, the remainder should be 0. So let me find out if mod 2 is 0 for every element of that vector. And it says false. So that tells me that they're not all even numbers. Now let's take a few examples of subsetting and using vector functions together. These are just a few examples. When we start scripting, we'll see many more ways that we can use these. So here I'm going to create a score vector. And now let's find all grades of A, 90 and above, in a vector of scores. So look what I'm doing here. I'm using score greater than or equal to 90. What will that do? That will create a true-false, a logical vector. Let me show you this intermediate step, because we're going to do these all together. Now what I'm doing is I'm subsetting on that logical vector. What does subsetting on a logical vector do? It returns all the values for which you have a true in the logical vector. So now when I run this one, and let's look at grade A. It returned for us all the scores that were made by students that had an A. Now, it's probably going to be the case that we have these in a data frame. That is, we have one row that has the students' names, like I have here, and we have another row or another column that has the scores. So that we have one column that has the student name, one column that has the student's scores. So here are the vectors that we might get from our data frame. One with the students' names, one with the student's score. So notice now what I'm going to do. I'm going to use that same logical vector here on line 159, that same logical vector, but I'm going to do it to subset student. And now it tells me which students got an A. Let's suppose that we want to sort the scores. Can we sort the students' names along with the score? Yes. And here is where we can use that order function. So again, let me show you the intermediate steps. So first, here's the scores. Now order score. Okay, remember that that 7 means that the lowest score's in the 7th place. Now when you do this extraction, what it's going to do is it's going to take student for the first score here. Let's just show you for the first score. Student 7 will be the 7th student name. In other words, you're going to be getting the student who made the lowest score. So now let's do that for the entire vector, student, and let's sort the scores. And now we have the student names and their corresponding scores rearranged in order. Pretty cool, huh? This is just a little flavoring of the types of things we can do with just a few functions. We'll learn many more later on, but these are some of the most commonly used functions that you will have when you're working with R. Rep repeats a vector. It's short for repeat. Sort will sort the elements of a vector. Rev is short for reverse, lists the elements of a vector in reverse order. Range returns the minimum and maximum elements in a vector. Unique will remove the duplicate entries in a vector. Sign returns the sign of the elements of a vector. Order will list the sorted element numbers of a vector. Any will check for whether there's truth values in a logical vector. And all will check whether the truth values in that logical vector are all true. And as you saw, each one of these of its own accord might not seem as useful, but when you mix it and when you store these in additional objects, that's when the true power comes in.